These were the lands of his mother, green, fragrant, barely touched, though feet had tread across it for centuries. The small animals of the pasture ruffled the grasses, scurrying for hiding places, having caught his scent. In the sky there was not one cloud, only the sun shining down on the eager world. Renzi walked along the narrow path that edged the untamed grassland. The view around him sucked him in and called to the places in his heart and mind tied to the old ways. He wished he could stay here forever, but regrettably, Renzi had to keep going. Soon came into view a circle of the eldest trees born before all else. As the breeze passed through the leaves, they whispered truths and secrets to the children playing there. They whispered magic and history to them. They whispered the lessons of the world. Each generation attended the school, from his mother down through the lineage of time. Those trees were his first teachers, but they had not taught him all the lessons he had needed to know. Lessons those children would never need to learn, for he was unlike them. He saw the bridge sway ahead and knew he was getting closer. It crossed a small brook that turned into a river during the heavy rains of spring. Each board was carved with the symbols and words of his mother's people, serving both beauty and purpose. Its beauty these days worn with decay, the memory of its purpose lost forever. As he crossed, Runcie looked over the edge. The small fish that made this place their home darted this way and that. Further upstream, some fishermen sat patiently waiting for them to get hungry. Tiny flying insects performed a semi-aerial ballet on the water's surface, but their flight was often cut short by a wise old toad that watched all this with a rather bored expression. It seemed as if nothing ever changed in the lands of his mother. The lands looked the same, and the people thought the same, and it wouldn't matter if 100 lifetimes passed. It would be the same. Now just ahead was a grand tree, though Renzi knew its greatness was created rather than innate. It was younger than the grove trees. When the wind caressed its branches it remained silent. All its glamour was produced, manufactured by the people. Wooden boards hung from the tree, each board different in every way, flapping in the wind and banging against each other. Each board sending out prayers, wishes, blessings, and names. The boards closer to the top, where fewer remained year after year, were older than his mother's family line could be traced to. But Rencie's eyes always fell to the lower boards, to his two boards. The first one was the one that bore his name. The hanging of his name was a tradition, the heart of the communal memory and acceptance. Only the wind and storms could take down a board. To remove it with mortal hands was a crime punishable by death. So his name board would always be there, next to hers. His other board was only a few feet from his name board. This one he had hung in the middle of the night when he was 10. It was a wish for a friend just like him. But it never came true. He was always different. And so he went to continue on towards the village, towards his mother. So he looked beyond the tree, looking for the familiar hardwood exteriors and slate roofs. But he found only the grasslands. The beautiful grasslands bathed in moonlight. Each blade lay still as if frozen in time, and the crickets didn't even sing. It was sterile, as if someone had painted a picture and replaced the real thing with a masterpiece. Disturbed, Renzi went down the path, walking in a brisk pace. He tried to escape the cold feeling in his stomach as he approached the old teaching trees. For the first time ever in his life, the trees were silent. He could see the breeze, but nothing moved in its wake. "I've gone deaf," Renzi thought with a gasp, but his gasp made it into the air and echoed around him. Now more anxious than before, he went to the bridge. The water lay like a sheet of ice, motionless and tranquil. It didn't ripple around the rocks or babble relentlessly. It was as if it had become a pond void of life, for no matter where he looked fish didn't appear. The bugs had vanished along with the wizened toad. He could see straight to the bottom, the smooth stones rounded over by years of aquatic caressing. It would have been beautiful if it had been meant to be that way. Instead it just made Renzi want to rush away faster, to be once again before the great tree. But even that didn't give him solace. All the boards hung stock still. He looked for his boards, but somehow managed to look past them to the grasslands. The dead, rotting grasslands spread before him. the dry earth murmuring of drought and disease, the plants and bugs, the victims scattered as far as the eye could see. No moon lit the scene. The light was that of waning stars. Sorrow and grief gripped his intestines. All the while his mind raced after a staggering thought. He had to go someplace, but all he was doing was walking in circles. But now seeing this, he had to get there sooner, quicker, 2 trips ago. Renzi jogged, saving in reserve some of his energy in case, just in case. Again he passed the wise trees, but he hardly spared their leafless, termite-bitten, wet-rotted carcasses a glance. His eyes were instead focused on the upcoming bridge, with its charred skeleton scarcely making it across the dried riverbed. Once his feet finally met the first rungs of the bridge, the wood chunks turned to ash. Renzi picked up his pace, not wanting to fall, not wanting to tear his eyes from the great tree. The tree stood there, leafless but whole, unlike the others. The boards had been stripped from it. They lay on the ground around it like casualties of a great war. But something new was in the branches of the tree. As Renzi attempted to focus on it, he fell. He fell to his knees before a graveyard that was lit by the blood-red light of a dying sun. Quickly he began to stand, for this graveyard should not have been there. Grass, bugs, rabbits, and flowers should have filled the belly of the earth, not his mother's people. He ran mindlessly, and once again he saw the ring of dead trees, but their classroom was not empty. The children of his mother's people filled it with their corpses. Engorged juicy maggots crawled and devoured the young flesh. Faster, his feet moved towards the bridge. The vein of the river was no longer dried. It flowed anew with blood, his mother's people's blood. But this didn't bother him. This meant nothing. He had to get back to the tree, so he went to cross the broken and burnt bridge, jumping from plank to plank. All the while his eyes begged for sight of the tree. They needed to find the thing in the branches. They silently threatened to cease all function if they didn't, and begrudgingly he saw it once again. He saw the mangled body and lost track of his footing. He jumped onto one of the gravestones, then right back onto the path. His feet moved before he willed them, and Renzi didn't argue. He was no longer alone in the graveyard. Red-eyed demons made of shadow and pain danced and drank on the bones of his mother's people. But the demons' playground stretched further than the graves. The classroom paddock had been transformed into a puppet theater. Threads of unnatural smoke held up the children, the dead children, the puppets. The demons snacked on the bloated maggots as the bodies of the children bounced around, telling demented tales without words. He would have preferred to stay there, but he couldn't. His feet didn't allow him, so on he went to the broken bridge with its river of blood to see what else hell had spewed onto these grounds. Taloned fingers, flame hair, eyeless sockets, and razored teeth graced the zombified top halves of the mermaids with fishbone tails. Their chilling song, which was reminiscent of metal scraping against slate, called to him as they tried to look tempting and lure him in for a swim. He just shut his eyes, seeing the silhouettes against his eyelids, the silhouettes of the tree and the body dripping blood, and though fear gripped his throat, he opened his eyes and took in the demon playground of the graveyard. But they were no longer satisfied with the stones. They were coming for him. So now once again he was grateful for his feet that ran of their own accord. And now they went faster, straining his body, pushing it to its limits. But it wasn't fast enough. The demons managed to trail their sharp claws, nails, bones, and assorted cutting feelers against his skin, stinging him. By the grove of trees they threw maggot bits at him. The path was getting harder to traverse as he slipped and slid on the concoction of life and death. The maggot goop and his blood began to coat his body and the path. He was leaving a trail that now drew in pursuers. How Renzi wished he could run faster, how he wished he could just keep going. And he did, right across the bridge as the cadaver sliced his ankles and calves. He made it to the base of the tree, thinking only of getting away, thinking of only climbing to freedom. Once in the branches, he just kept going up and up and up, till he came face to face with the mutilated body. "Mother!" he cried, and he fell back from the tree, back into the blood river. He closed his eyes to the pain, hoping to feel and see no more. Once his lungs ran out of air, he expected for the cold, lifeless blood to enter his lungs and make them as lifeless as the world he was leaving. Instead, air once again surrounded his face, as did the stench of urine and fecal matter. "Get up, dog. It's check-out time," said the guard. When one wakes from a nightmare into a living hell, they tend to prefer the nightmare. For in dreams everything means nothing. Unfortunately, Renzi's nightmare was based on truth. Demons did befall the land of his mother's people. They killed her kin. Now they strove to wipe all evidence of their existence away. That's why Renzi was getting taken to the ground of the whispering trees. But this ground no longer was home to them. Now it was home to an arena made of stone from the depleted quarry. It was surrounded by paved roads, tall stone buildings, and masses of devouring, supposedly sentient creatures. Renzi knew he would not miss this world like he missed the world of his mother. So quietly he put his head on the chopping block, waiting for release. Over the hum of the eager crowd he heard the axeman say, "Last words." "Curse my father's The axeman had not let him finish. The crowd then cheered. When the axeman pushed his body aside to make way for the next, the arena filled with chanting.